Welcome, welcome, EPN friends, as you're getting logged in and tuned in. As you're arriving, I invite you to post in the chat feature of Zoom who you are, where you're from, so that our panelists can start to see where you're hailing from in today's workshop.
I also see a reminder about the conference that's coming up in February, and I'm excited to share that Education Equals Hope will be there. So looking forward to meeting some of the people that will be a part of the webinar today.
All right, I think I'll go ahead and get us started. Welcome, friends. Good afternoon. Episcopal Parish Network is delighted to welcome you to today's workshop on serving the global community, strengthening parish outreach. My name is Mother Caitlin Keith. I am a priest here in Columbia, South Carolina, and an Episcopal Parish Network board member, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here today. We are excited to present these programs and this webinar in particular to you. We invite you to learn more about the Episcopal Parish Network. You can learn more on our website, episcopalparishes.org. And for more awesome workshops like this, we invite you to our 40th annual conference, which, as you have heard us talking about, will be in Kansas City, February 25th through the 28th. You can find more information about that on our website. I am delighted today to introduce our friends from Education Equals Hope and my friends and colleagues from my diocese and my parish here in the Diocese of Upper South Carolina. I asked Joe Swimmer for the special opportunity to get to introduce my people to you all. And especially this workshop, which will be moderated by my bishop, Bishop Daniel Richards. Thank you all for being here. EPN, like so many organizations, EPN is made up of lots of different kinds of parishes. And so we know that not all workshops exactly fit every single parish that you may be here representing. But I hope that this workshop lets you gain insight and sparks conversation with you and your teams and your leadership groups. We ask that for today's webinar, you post your questions and your comments in the chat feature, which will be down at the bottom of your Zoom, and our panel will try to get to them throughout the session or at the end of the session. And also, as you see others doing, introduce yourself in the chat, let our panelists know where you are joining us from today, and say hi. And finally, if you must leave early, that is understandable. All webinars, the recordings are sent to you automatically at the end of the webinar. So if you leave early, know that you will get to catch back up. But in addition to today's webinar being sent to you, our whole catalog of webinars for Episcopal Parish Network and many of our keynotes from conferences are available on our website or on the Episcopal Parish Network YouTube. And as always, they are free for the whole church. So you can go look back through the back catalog. There are so many good and helpful and useful and inspiring things in there. And finally, if your parish is not a member of the Episcopal Parish Network, I invite you to take a look and to join us. We are a network of 240 plus member parishes and programs, and it is the membership of all of those parishes that make this possible and allow us to offer these webinars free for the whole church. More information about membership can be learned by emailing us at info@episcopalparishes.org or on our website. And with that, I want to introduce you to my people, finally. So as I mentioned, today's conversation will be moderated by my bishop, Bishop Daniel Richards, who is here in Columbia, South Carolina with me down the road. I would like to introduce you to Deacon Diana Dederick, who is the deacon at my parish and a beloved friend. She's the deacon at St. Martin's in the Fields Episcopal Church here in Columbia. I want to introduce you to my friend Dorian Del Piore, who is the rector of Holy Cross Episcopal Church in Simpsonville, South Carolina. We also have Cameron Vivanco, who is the co-founder and director of Education Equals Hope. and the scholarship program in Ecuador, and to Celeste Bundy, who is the executive director of Education Equals Hope, located in Fort Mill, South Carolina. With that, I turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. And I would first like to start by introducing Marvin Guayanay, who is an Education Equals Hope graduate. He was one of our very first students and a dear, dear friend of mine as well, because he's now 30 and I met him when he was 8. Because I'm old.
I'm glad we all don't have to report our ages in this call, right? So, okay. Sorry, Marvin.
So I am going to share my screen. Before I do that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for tuning in. The questions that we're going to look at today: how do we know if short-term missions is worth it and short-term mission programs? And I also want to throw the caveat in that I am coming to you from South America. I am sitting in the country of Ecuador in the capital city, Quito, where we are having rolling blackouts up to 14 hours today. 14 hours a day. And today my house will have 14 hours of no electricity. And so I'm on a big battery right now. And we are hoping that the battery lasts until the power comes back on. So with that, we're going to start. Anything else I need to say, Celeste?
I think we're good.
Okay, we're going to go straight to our program. I'm going to share my screen. Is it there?
No.
No, I'm hitting share. There we go.
There we go. Perfect.
Okay. So Education Equals Hope is a program that started. I'm an Episcopal missionary, been in the country of Ecuador for 22 years. And I jokingly say, because it's not a joke, that I accidentally started Education Equals Hope along with Chip Smith, another member of the Upper South Carolina family. And it has turned from helping one girl who was 15 years old go get back into school. She was 15 and in 3rd grade. So it's grown from her to now we have all of these places around the world that we get to support students. This is last year's board report. This year, there were 959 students that were supported in Ecuador and also in Haiti and Costa Rica and Rwanda and Kenya and Uganda and Madagascar. We partner with the Episcopal Diocese here in Ecuador, in Haiti, and in Madagascar. So
over 3,000 students globally.
Yes, over 3,000 students. So the other places you see on the map are not Episcopal, but they're great and wonderful too. So to get to the core of today's workshop, we're going to talk about philosophy of short-term mission. Why do we do short-term mission? What is the main purpose? How do we know if it's worth it or if it's done well? How do we define success in short-term mission? And I'm going to go over some information super quickly to lay the groundwork to give everyone the opportunity to have the context as our other panelists come in. So the first thing I want to say is that we try really hard not to use the word trip. This comes from Roger Peterson and his work in Maximum Impact Short-Term Mission. And there are 2 reasons why we would not want to refer to this as a trip. And if you stop and think about it, I'm sure that you'll come up with those same things yourself. We don't want to use the word trip because it's a trip has a definite beginning and a definite end. And if short-term mission is done well, there's a definite beginning, but there should not be a definite end. That arrow should go on into perpetuity. All of short-term mission, if it is done well, has aspects of pilgrimage in it. So we are looking for what God is doing, what is the divine doing, and we are just as interested in what God is doing in somebody on short-term mission as what God is doing through that person. We want both of those things. But so that beginning and end, and I think we all know that we can't put an end on any of the projects that God is working in us about, refining our character and hopefully making us more and more Christ-like. The second reason that we don't want to use the word trip is that a trip is focused on the people with the suitcase. And if short-term mission is done well, yes, you can see that that number one is the people with the suitcases. It should be a positive impact for them, but it is also about the people that are hosting or kind and generous enough, gracious enough to accept the team in their midst. The host receivers, so the people with the suitcases and the people that they are serving and serving with. And then it's all the people around the people with the suitcases and all the people around the local church, wherever that is on field. So if short-term mission is done well, we need to understand that it should positively impact these 4 different groups of people, and that instead of 10 or 15 people having a trip together, or 6 or 7 or how many it is, we have the potential to impact hundreds, if not thousands of lives, if we can remember that short-term, that's the point and the goal of short-term mission, that it is a positive benefit for these 4 different areas. So not only the goers, but the goers going back into their home communities, and the host receivers and them going back into their communities. Those are the 4 groups of people that should be positively impacted, and why we would really encourage you to just stop and even brainstorm out with your people, why should we not call this a mission trip, a mission experience, a short-term mission, but try to avoid that trip word. The process of short-term mission, I do know that I'm going super fast, so Celeste, go like this if I need to slow down.
Sure.
There are 3 parts to a short-term mission. There's the pre-field, the on-field, and the post-field. For so long, the on-field is the only thing that's gotten so much play. And that's for the reason, because on-field is where the miracles happen. On-field is where orphans are held and tummies are filled and discipleship happens and people know that they're not alone. But it is also the least important of the 3. The pre-field is super important before you go, and sometimes it's getting better, but we certainly have had churches along the way be like, oh yeah, we just met in the airport. Is that a problem? Yeah, it would be great for you to be prayed up. It's great for you guys to know each other, to know what you're doing. I have experienced people being like, what language do they speak in Ecuador? And I'm like, really? You got on a
Where are
plane?
the giraffes?
I have been asked, where are the giraffes? The correct continent, correct hemisphere, just one continent over. Just head on over to Africa. Anyway, pre-field, something about going to practice and you do better in the game, studying, you do better on the test. And then the last one is the post field. And again, that's where that arrow goes into perpetuity. That is where we can see where the rubber meets the road, what God was doing in us and what God is doing through us. That is where we see the fruit of that labor. So that's just the context. That brings us to, how do we judge success in short-term mission? This idea, there are 2 ways that Equals H judges success in short-term missions. And the first one is called the 5 F's. And we're going to go through that at light speed. And then we're also going to go through something that we call reciprocal partnership as opposed to mutual using. The first way of how we define success is the 5 F's, and it's been developed by Dr. Tim Dearborn and Dr. Lisa Espinelli-Chin. So the 5 F's are the stages that people tend to go through. No one's going to make you, but people tend to go through after an important event in their lives. And generally, short-term missions is an event that marks somebody's life because they see God in a new way. They learn about God. They are discipled. They disciple others. Their worldview is challenged. Their context is challenged. There are all sorts of really wonderful things that happen during short-term missions. But the 5 F's is what happens in the post field. We said that is the most important, and the post field generally can be qualified as this. The first stage, when you get back from a short-term mission, if you've ever done short-term mission, I encourage you to put these things, run these things through your mind. I think that they can happen after a happening or a cursillo or a vocari or any intentional time of seeking and serving God. But the first F is fun. It's just fun to be home. You're not on high alert anymore. It's great to speak the language and know what's going on around you if you had gone somewhere otherwise. So fun. And then the second one is flee. And that's when we tend to flee from our home culture. We withdraw or we isolate from people, not because they're not the wonderful people that we left a week before or 10 days before, but when we get back and people say, hey, how was, and I'm in Ecuador, so I'm going to use that. Hey, how was Ecuador? And if you give them more than a sound bite, it was great, it was good. Well, they sometimes will glaze over. And so there's this a sense of isolation that you don't know how to connect, you don't know how to explain what you've lived, and you don't want to let go of what you've lived yet. You don't want normalcy to creep in, and so we tend to flee from our home culture. Fun first, flee second, third is fight. And fight is just when we get ticked off at our home culture. Why? Why is the US so time oriented? Or why are we so focused on task instead of on people? And generally, it's a misplaced passion. It's a desire for something good, but we don't know what to do with it. So fun, flee, fight. The fourth one is fit in. You're just done. Dorian, are you recognizing some of these pictures? And fit is just, it's not fun to be home anymore. It's normal. You can't flee or withdraw the whole time. You too tired to fight. And so you just fit back in. And short-term mission becomes a lovely memory on a shelf that gets pulled out for a youth Sunday sermon, or maybe on a list of things for why you want to run for vestry. But you can't tell the difference between someone who's done short-term mission and someone who hasn't. And that is a problem. Short-term mission, if we can do it well, should positively impact your life and give you the opportunity to live that forward. So if you stop at a fit stage, that is what is called an aborted process. And just to help you with that visual, abort. But the fifth F is what we're after. So fun, flee, fight, fit. But the fifth F is fruit, that we would bear fruit, that we would be known as Jesus's disciples by the fruit that we bear. That comes from John 15, the whole concept that God has done something in us while he's doing something through us, and it's gotten our attention so that when we return home and we're pouring back into our community there, that we live differently in some way. How you spend your time or your money or your resource or who you're involved with or how you pour in. There are lots and lots of ways that fruit can look. It would be silly of me to tell you what your fruit should be, but half of how we define success in Education Wills Hope in our short-term missions process is that you would bear fruit when you go home. North Americans are amazing at rising to the challenge and meeting a goal if they know that the goal exists. So often in short-term mission, it's just like, hey, we went and did that and that was great and now we're done. That's not the whole goal of short-term mission. So success, half of how we define success is that you would bear fruit. The second half of how we would define success comes from a man named Roberto Guerrero, a pastor in the Dominican Republic, who I had a chance to meet years and years ago. And the story he told was that he and his wife felt called by God to open a church, open a medical center, start a school, after school program, combat gangs. I mean, the whole 9 yards, right? Like to do everything that they possibly could in one of the marginalized areas of Santo Domingo. And they had $20 in their bank account and they were just going to do it. And there was a mega church that got wind of them and had connection and relationship and came down to support them and help them. And they did that through teams. And after about 3 or 4 teams, Pastor Roberto said, thanks so much for coming, but we're good. You don't need to come back anymore. And that was a huge, like, what do you mean? We're dreaming together. We're going to do ministry together. What do you mean? And he said, well, you're bringing 4 things in with you that are doing us more harm than good. So your good intentions, while great, are not good enough. And what he called them to die to, and that's really strong language, are the following 4 things. And it has everything to do with not creating a level playing field, but understanding that there is already a level playing field in the body of Christ and in God's world. The first thing he called them to die to was their cultural prejudice. Some of you know that that's a guinea pig, a roasted guinea pig served with some French fries. Most North Americans that come to Ecuador, this is a national delicacy here. They come to Ecuador and they freak out that their pet is on a plate. It's not right. It's not wrong. It's just different. We're not eating your pet. These are guinea pigs here in Ecuador. But our cultural prejudice, again, prejudice is that our way is the right way and our way is better. So we want to examine cultural prejudice. We want to examine intellectual prejudice. At what point do people who come in to help have education or higher education or degrees or know how to read or write or to do math and working with people who don't? And it's easy to portray that you're just a little bit better. I mean, your mama raised you right. You're never going to say that out loud, but that intellectual prejudice, we need to die to that prejudice to enter into reciprocal partnership. We need to die to spiritual prejudice. The first time I was given a little shot glass of grape juice and a little square of Wonder Bread, I was rolling my eyes until God brought me up short. How dare, who do I think I am that I have the corner on the market on how God wants to be worshiped? I'm thrilled to get to worship him in the Episcopal Church. And that is, as a cradle Episcopalian, it feeds my heart and soul. But how do we die to our spiritual prejudice? And the 4th thing was to die to any shred of self-seeking ambition, that it's all about me. Obviously, Philippians tells us, but in humility, we are to consider others better than ourselves. How do we let go of what we want, how we want to do it, when we want to do it, how we want to do it, to enter into reciprocal relationship, partnership that is a partnership, and is my screen still on? Intellectual prejudice, cultural prejudice, spiritual prejudice, self-seeking ambition, that we die to those things so that we acknowledge the level playing field that is already happening. In Acts, it talks about how it is more blessed to give than to receive. And I love the picture of the hands, that one hand is giving and one hand is receiving. So in short-term missions, if we are to do it right, success is that we would bear fruit in the post field and that we would enter into those reciprocal partnerships while on field. We also spend a lot of time as a program looking at what is poverty. Poverty is a whole lot more than just a lack of things. Generally, we define poverty as a lack of food or water or medicine or housing. And those things are true and accurate. And it is hard doing life without those things. But that is only part of what poverty is. Poverty is, that part is called poverty of condition. There's also a poverty of self, a poverty of dignity. There's also poverty of responsibility. And then we want to spend some time digging into what is the difference between relief and development, and how do we actually alleviate poverty without hurting the poor in the process, or without hurting those who live in poverty, and how they define it. So that's drinking from a fire hydrant. There's so much more to unpack in each one of those, but really wanted to lay that context, give that context so that we can enter into the rest of this conversation about how do we know if short-term mission works. And Bishop Daniel and Dorian and Deanna have all been here, and Celeste and Marvin has grown up in this. So those are the people that we'd like to turn it over to now. Did I forget anything, Celeste?
No, that's great. If you just want to stop sharing your screen so we can all see one another's faces again and just continue this dialogue. Daniel, I know you have a few questions for our panelists, so we'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, so really briefly, I went down after becoming bishop in Upper South Carolina to be with Cameron and the team. Celeste and I were on the same group, and walked out into one of the churches that we visited there in Quito. And there's this mural on the wall. And I had been wondering about how missions could be placed as a center role in the life of the diocese. And as I looked at this mural, it was filled with names of people who are leaders throughout this diocese, and now leaders throughout 4 or 5 dioceses around us who grew up here, who were involved in short-term missions. And Dorian and Deacon Diana were both in that mural. So as I learned from that moment, the bearing fruit part is definitely going on in this diocese from, I don't know, has it been 20 years? Has it been 20 years? Yeah, 22 years. It was 20 the year I went. So 22 years of short-term mission work has played out all over our area. And so my question, Deacon, you've been involved with Education Equals Hope for over 16 years. Both of you have dragged your relationship with Education Equals Hope to several different congregations now. Sometimes drag some parishioners along with you. But Diana, you've been involved with Education Equals Hope for 16 years. Most recently this summer, you helped lead a pilgrimage for St. Martin's to Ecuador. What was the impact of that pilgrimage for your parish?
First, I need to give a little background about this pilgrimage. St. Martin's was going to take a group of our young people to France. And the kids were excited. They fixed their calendars so that they had 2 weeks open in the summer. And you know how kids are. They're at camps, they're at all kinds of events. So it was only those 2 weeks that they could go. Well, then something funny happened in the world called the Summer Olympic Games. And when it was time for us to make those finalized plans for the kids to go, the prices had skyrocketed since we had decided to do this pilgrimage. And the day that our youth minister said at staff meeting that she was canceling that pilgrimage and was just hoping that something else would open up, I got a call from Celeste. And she said, Diana, when are you going to cement a stronger connection between St. Martin's and Education Equals Hope? Now, I had already had an amazing connection with Education Equals Hope from just all the experiences of my previous times there. Plus, they make my dalmatics, the ladies, the moms of the kids in E Equals Hope, Education Equals Hope, they make my dalmatics. They made all my deacon stools. They make the corporals for our Eucharistic visitor kits. They make the baptismal towels for our baptisms. And whenever I do a Eucharistic visit and I have one of these beautiful corporals, then I can tell the story about Education Equals Hope to our parishioners. And then every time I come back, they want to know, which corporal do you have this time, Diana? Because they're all unique and beautiful. So we had that relationship, but she wanted more. And I said, well, Celeste, let me tell you what just happened. We've had to cancel our pilgrimage to France, and this is why. And she said, well, can you come to Ecuador? And I said, I don't know. It has to be a pilgrimage, and you guys just do short-term mission, and we alternate. So it has to be a pilgrimage. The kids want to do care of creation, and we only have these 10 days that we can make this work. So Celeste says, what are those 10 days? And I told her, and then I hear this hysterical laughter, and it's the only 10 days that are available on their whole schedule for the summer. So God was already playing around, and God said, these kids are going to Ecuador. So I called the youth pastor in the room. She's across the hall. Alex, I think we're going to Ecuador. And then I think the very next day we spoke to John Allen, who's on the staff at E=H. And we talked to him about what we wanted. And he said, we've never done a pilgrimage before. And I said, well, I know this really great curriculum that was developed by the Episcopal Church. And he looked at the curriculum, and then a couple days later, he said, I think we can do this. So he took a chance on us. And I think it's because of the relationships that had already been established between our diocese, between Cameron and myself. And we took the kids to Ecuador, and they will tell you that it was the most life-changing experience ever. And we're talking privileged kids here that took this pilgrimage. They were able to find God in the very small places. But the greatest thing was that before we left, they said, we're going to bring a proposal to the vestry, because number one, we have a garden. We don't call it a community garden, we call it a sharing garden, but we don't have compost. So we want a compost pile at the church. And we have this amazing kitchen with this amazing dishwasher that they use in restaurants. We don't want our church to use paper products anymore. And we are wondering why we have these books in the back of our pews called the Book of Common Prayer that we never open, because we have these bulletins that have the entire service printed in them. What about if we get rid of these bulletins? And if somebody really wants a bulletin, we've got these QR codes. Let them just do the QR code and have it on their phone if they really have to have it. So they're in the process of putting together a proposal for our vestry. And those are the three things that they want. And those all came from the pilgrimage. The other thing, our church has 3 high schools that feed into it. And our youth director is amazing, incredible. Oh my gosh, you can't have her. We want her forever. And EYC was great on Sundays, over 30 kids there. But after EYC, they all went their separate ways until Ecuador. And once we did Ecuador, the kids all through the summer would meet for lunch once a week, go to the movies together. So the relationships that they made with our host and the people in Ecuador, they also made with themselves in a new way that they hadn't made before.
Thank you. It's been fun to watch that youth group really blossom, coming out of their experience this summer. And those experiences are not always centered around creation care, but that one in particular has had an impact that's continued to hear about in my office for the last several months. It's been a lot of fun. Dorian, you have been down to Ecuador a number of times. I think you were just there this summer again. Am I remembering correctly? 23. So tell us about your experience there.
So my background is that I met Cameron at a happening event back in 2008, I think. And she said, hey, come down to Ecuador. And I was a naive, fairly new full-time youth. Yeah, I fell for it. Naive, newly sort of full-time youth minister. It's like, yeah, let's do that. I've never been out of the country myself. And I'm going to trust, or parents are going to trust me to take their, children out of the country. But it was a radically transformative experience on many levels. And with St. John's in Colombia, we did 3 missions. Then I went to seminary, and I actually brought Cameron and Roberto to Virginia Seminary to do forums and build relationships there. And then I served at St. Peter's here in Greenville. I helped put together a mission, but ended up transitioning to the cathedral, so didn't go on that one, and then helped facilitate a mission at the cathedral that was a joint venture between 4 churches, 4 or 5, and then here at Holy Cross. That was part of my draw to answer the call here. Among a big list of things was an already established deep relationship with Cristo Librador and Education Equals Hope. So I've had this, kind of, dragging the relationship between, I mean, in some places it's already there, and it's just been really rich. And when I think of my experiences, in all the different teams, I kind of identified roughly like 5 ways that have really been impactful for me personally and for the people that have been involved. Discernment, just general discernment around ministry, life, callings, vocation. One of those missions in Ecuador, my wife and I were sitting together. She was really, really hesitant. She grew up Catholic, didn't really feel that great about being married to a priest. And it was in that context, in our discussions, our ministry experiences, that God opened her heart, and we began that journey together towards the priesthood. I've had numerous young people discern missions and go into young adult service corps, Episcopal service corps from their mission experiences in Ecuador, discerning leadership into vestry, diocesan youth leadership committees. I mean, just across the board, from lay to ordained, discernment. Tied to that is leadership development. You're able to give people responsibilities and let them step into leadership in a way that sometimes they can't conceive of when you're just at home, and allows them to kind of step out of their comfort zone and explore gifts and talents that God has blessed them with in a way that maybe they weren't open to previously or hadn't even conceived of. Relationships across the diocese, I already sort of alluded, one of our missions had 4 or 5 churches involved, but even my first one had, I think, we took like 18 youth, and at least 4 were from our diocesan youth leadership committee. So there was 4 other churches besides St. John's represented. Every single mission that I've been on has had across the diocese type relationships, and even our past one in 2023, and we're repeating it in 2025, a relationship across diocese where we partnered with Chapel of the Cross in
Chapel Hill.
Durham. Chapel Hill. I always want to say Durham.
Definitely Chapel Hill. You don't say Durham.
I know. I get in trouble every time. I don't know why.
Dorian.
I don't know why. I get in trouble every time. It's probably because my daughter lived in Durham for a while. That's what my brain wants to do. And we're doing that again with them. And so developing these relationships between dioceses and between churches, and then cross-cultural relationships. I'm going to do that one last. Cross-generational relationships. Many of these missions have been youth focused, but like many have not. Our team from Holy Cross in 23 and the one coming up, between the 2 teams, only 1 youth from our parish. It has been, in fact, I was the youngest at 44 2 years ago from our team. But these cross-generational relationships, between folks in the parish that may not always interact, is really powerful and enhances your relationships within the parish. And then there's the cross-cultural, the folks here at Holy Cross. I mean, I've maintained a relationship with Mother Lourdes at Cristo Librador across these years, Facebook and different things like that. I knew her when she was at Emmaus, when she nursed a poor, sick lay youth minister during a rough time, and just seeing her ministry pour into me and really challenge me. Her visionary abilities and just her gifts are just remarkable. She can see a building and see its use in a way that no one else could really imagine. It's just really remarkable. And then some folks in Holy Cross, like Ann Smith, who was my previous senior warden. I've known her family since my lay youth ministry days. Like Ann met a young man. I mean, he was a child, and she went to Ecuador many, many years ago, and has maintained a relationship with his family through Facebook Messenger, helping him practice his English, checking in. I mean, just pouring into that relationship throughout, all these, almost 2 decades. I mean, just really pouring into that relationship. And it just continues to last and continues to be so vital and important to her life and her ministry. And it's just been a reciprocal, fruitful relationship. Had a group of moms
Dorian, I'm
which
going
Ann
to
Smith is.
interrupt you
Oh,
one
am I going
second.
too long?
No, because I
Uh,
want to tag on because what you just said is so important. And this is the handles for it is the best way to do short-term ministry is through long-term relationship. The best way to do short-term ministry is through long-term partnership. And that's what you and Diana have both been saying. These are like your personal stories and grabs, but it's that long-term that allows the short-term to be effective. Back to you. I'm done.
Cool. Yeah. Well, and it just goes further because it's about, Brenda. This group of moms met Brenda and developed a relationship through Educational's Hope and through Cristo, and then poured into Brenda's education, from her, primary, college, nursing school, and made sure that she could access every step of the way in her education. But it poured out even more. Brenda's charismatic. She's awesome, and she loves her family and her friends and her church. And she realized for the blessings that she had, and it's like, well, how do I also, enable others to have these sorts of relationships too, and to have this experience too? And so it just has this ripple effect of relationships that literally transform lives and change lives and uplift people in such a remarkable way. And now Brenda's pouring back into, through Educational's Hope and Youth World and in so many ways with her skill set. And, we've hosted Brenda here at Holy Cross. She's coming back again in December. And the door is always, this is home, for her. And we want to give her a platform of gratitude and teaching and just that relationship. It's just been really awesome. So just to sum up: discernment, leadership development, cross-generational relationships, cross-cultural relationships, and then relationships across the broader church.
Brenda's been doing Bible studies with our youth group and our youth minister since we were in Ecuador, and she's having dinner at my house on Friday night.
That's amazing.
And I just want to highlight, Dorian's a board member. And before you start thinking that that's a board pitch, Dorian talks about Ecuador long before he was serving on the board, and just the same enthusiasm, because we've all seen what happens when our folks go, adults, youth, and they get the vision of what mission is as opposed to mission trip. And part of that vision difference is that the people that we ostensibly go to serve, we actually go to serve with. And we discover not recipients of our grace, but fellow pilgrims in the grace of God. And I think Marvin is one of the great examples of that. Marvin, mi hermano, it's good to see you. We have just time and time again, when I was there, I've heard it from other folks. Part of the vision difference for us is that is the leaders that we get back when we go to experience God and the people that we meet in Ecuador. And time again, Brenda is one lovely example. I can think of a half a dozen others, including the Bishop of Ecuador Central, who is both a person we have served with, but also a friend and a part of this Education Equals Hope community, because what we discover is that we are brothers and sisters in Christ. Marvin, can you tell us what, as a graduate and student of Education Equals Hope, do you ever wonder what your life would have looked like without it?
Thank you very much, and hi to everyone. Thank you for have this opportunity to share about my story. Also with the people has been part of the Education Equals Hope for many years. That it's excited for me because maybe many of you have been helping and support Education Equals Hope and people like me for many years, and now I have the opportunity to say thank you very much. Well, just I want to share a little bit about me, just to have the context. How could be my life without Education Equals Hope? I want to share a little bit about me. So I am the third son of four. My dad just had a for kids, and I was the third one. And I born in a place in the south of the country called Loja, which is really in the south, where my parents had no very resources, no very few resources, and well, nobody has resources in that place. We basically live from the agriculture, um, mainly from the peanuts, growing peanuts, and that was the resources that we have that we had in that place. And in this place, we have no hope to study. There is only one large room where all the children go, which they call a school. One room for all the kids for the community. One room with one teacher for all the subjects. So you can imagine that we don't have opportunities to go to the school or either to go to the college to graduate to get a career major. So that situation, that difficult situation, my father just decided to move to Quito in 95 when I just 1 year old, and looking for more opportunities or a better job. And uh, was when my mom just decided to get divorced from my dad. I was just I was just 6 years old, and in that moment I had no the idea to go to the school. Um, my dad was my first teacher. He he had no resources to bring me to the school, so I just stayed all the day in my house during this year, and he just teach me to read, and he teach me to write, and all the things that he knew, because he also didn't have the opportunities when he was a kid. So he teach me all the things that he knew. Um, in that moment, when I was 9 years old, was when I met Cameron, and she came to my church in Carmen Bajo in Quito, and she came with teams, and, and yeah, I was in 5th grade, and all of my teachers just told me about the potential that I had, and that I have to look for more opportunities or foundations. So they were talking with with my dad to go to talk doors to more opportunities for me, resources to go to a better school, because I was in a really bad school with drugs and people with the same situations like me, and was a really hard situation. Just you can imagine how could be my life if I don't had the opportunity to be part of Education Equals Hope. So I have been part of Education Equals Hope since that moment to I got graduate, and like 3 or 4 years ago, I don't know when was it.
When he graduated salutatorian of his class.
Yeah.
And then an equals age donor came forward to offer to help with university, where he graduated with a sound engineering degree. And maybe somebody on this call knows what HCG World Radio is, but he is the only sound engineer on staff for HCJB World Radio. That his very proud friend.
Way to go, Marvin.
Yeah.
So you're in your office, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly where I am right now. So I hope you can see all the things that we have the opportunity to design for this station, ACJB, and maybe this room that where I am right now, it was possible because I had the opportunity to study through Education Equals Hope, and that's incredible, because from here we can share the gospel to other places too. And so this is a really good thing that we have. So yeah, this is a little bit about me, because my life has been a little interesting. So yeah, thank you very much to hear me.
So I'm just going to address the question that Karen asked me. What is the difference between a pilgrimage and a short-term mission? In a pilgrimage, we go to experience God in a place, so that the lens of our lives gets attuned to how God is active in places, so that when we come home, we are able to see God in the place where we are. And I think the difference is that with short-term mission work, we go to see God at work in people. And then we join in the work of supporting people that we've never met before. Hopefully with the lens of our life gets changed, gets attuned to be able to see God at work and the people around us in new ways when we come home. And that the power of that for me, I think for a number of our folks that have been in Ecuador with Education Equals Hope, or in the case of our diocese in Haiti, we have a long-term relationship there, is that we discover that the way that God is at work in people around the world awakens in us a deeper sensitivity to the ways that God is at work where we are. And hopefully also awakens within us an awareness of justice issues and fairness issues and education issues and all of that. But at the center of all of that is how God is at work in people, as opposed to just God being at work in places. And both of them are important. But as you can tell, the impact this has had on our diocese is just incredible. And folks like Marvin become for us gospel in living flesh and radio waves, as well as in all the other ways that we meet. As we come to the sort of last few minutes, is there anything that any of our panelists want to add briefly before we?
I just want to say, as a deacon, when I am assigned to a parish, the first thing I do there is build relationships with the people so that we can discern together what God is calling us to do. And then we create this wonderful ministry, and then the bishop assigns me somewhere else. But with Education Equals Hope, I can take that ministry with me in a way that I can't take a ministry that I've created at another parish with me. And that's one of the things that's given me such great joy is, yes, I have to leave the relationships of a parish, but I don't have to leave the relationships from Education Equals Hope. And I can take that with me to every parish that I go. And I try very hard to do that because there's nothing like it.
And I would say too that we work with parishes of all sizes. We've had teams that are 3 people, and then we've had teams that are over 30 people. So if you're in this webinar thinking, oh gosh, this doesn't apply to me because my parish is too small or we're too big, we, as Cameron likes to say, with our scholarship programs, we like to tailor make the program around the community where we serve. And we try to do the exact same thing with the goers and the parishes that we get to work with here in the States. So we want to include you in our work, and just honored that you took the opportunity to learn about what we're doing and how we believe in missions.
And we want you to use any of the information, any of the philosophy anywhere that you do missions. We want missions to be as healthy as possible, because that makes churches and communities as healthy as possible as we grow in Christ likeness.
And as this is part of the Episcopal Parish Network, I just want to state, I can't overstate how much of an impact this has had in congregations across our diocese and across the Carolinas and North Georgia. The relationship we particularly had with Education Equals Hope and with other ministries where our folks have gone overseas and come back, those people become spiritual batteries for our communities. And so part of that question being asked is, being a part of the network, why short-term missions work is important is because of the depth that it adds to the relationships and the sense of justice and the ways that God is at work in the world. And when you get a few people in your community who have that vision, it transforms your community in ways that lead us to be more Christ-like.
I would jump in with a pilgrimage ambassador question that Bob
From Bob?
and that
Yes.
would be, that in any country that you go to, the U.S. Embassy will have an awareness email program that you can set up. Like you can go onto their webpage and sign up to get information about that particular country or any of the power outages, for example, any of the issues going on there. And generally, the embassy isn't going to do anything past that, except if you do register for them and some catastrophe happens, and they would know to try to get you out. But we, as a program, we have our emergency protocol, and part of that is connected with the embassy. And so, but always a good idea to do your due diligence. Just keep your expectations reasonable with embassies.
Well, we've come to the end of our time. I want to thank all of our panelists for being with us. I want to thank the Episcopal Parish Network for their hosting for today, in particular our own Reverend Caitlin Keith. We have some phenomenal clergy in this diocese, and it's hard for me not to brag about them as I'm looking at them. I'm just really proud of them. And I am overjoyed about the history that I've inherited here of short transmission work, and particularly the role that Education Equals Hope plays. I hope for all of you coming on today that you can see what a benefit this is to parishes and congregations of all sizes. And with that,
can I extend that and say we'd love for you to come along and see what we're about if this webinar has intrigued you. We take what we call vision teams to Ecuador twice a year. Our next opportunity to come and visit and see what we're about would be at the end of January 30th through February the 4th. It's a short 5-night experience to see all that we do in Quito and surrounding areas. And then also we'll do that again in the fall of 2025. But would love to invite you guys to come and join us and be a part of the amazing work that God has blessed us with.
And I will just say, you will be blessed by good food and great people. Holy God, we give you thanks for the ways that you are at work in the world about us. We thank you for the lives that have been touched by the ministries of your church in all of its forms. We thank you especially for Education Equals Hope and the people of the churches of Ecuador, for the Diocese of Ecuador El Central, and for the friendships and relationships that continue to bloom under your people's love and care. Be with us as we go forth, and bless our congregations as we serve in your name. Thank you for the parishes represented, for the folks around the church gathered in your name. And may your Son's name be glorified for all that we do. And may the Spirit have free reign in our hearts. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
God bless you all.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining us.